And if this team's able to stay together with their draft picks and everything, I can see them not being dethroned for a long time. That's where I'm looking at is, in my heart of hearts, do I want 7 games? Absolutely. But I don't think it's going to go that way, and I think OKC is going to be fairly dominant.
You bring up a good point there in that in a league of parity right now, this is one of the few teams that you could see with dynasty potential with how they are built. So they would be somewhat of an anomaly. We're used to dynasties in league history. It's been something that I think is great for the league whether people want to admit that or not. I think that familiarity is helpful in building of those legacies of multiple titles. But with the cap and the new laws, the new regulations with that, it is going to be interesting to see how many pieces they can keep and how many need to move on, given that you can really kind of have like 2 max contracts and then you have to kind of figure it out differently with the rest of your team. Welcome to another episode of In the Lab with Hoopsology. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back at it again. We have the NBA Finals coming up, so of course we've got to do an NBA Finals preview in the lab. I am your host, Matt Thomas, joined, as always, by my co-host and one of my best friends, Justin Goodrum. Justin, how you doing, man?
Doing pretty well. I'm ready for this NBA Finals to start getting going. I think in a much better mood compared to last year's playoffs. If listeners were around last year, they know my disdain for what I saw, so this is much better. So I'm in a much better mood.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how we feel after this finals wraps up. We'll talk about that more as we go through this episode. And I'm speaking to you. I'm speaking about the future. You will hear some analysis from Allan, our other co-host. He just wasn't able to join us for this segment, or you could look at it as I wasn't able to join for the other segment, but a lot of analysis, great hard-hitting analysis coming your way in this episode. And Justin, I first want to give a shout out to our listeners, followers, subscribers. Thank you so much. Again, views just have been climbing lately, along with followers to our YouTube channel and downloads on our podcast as well. Just want to say again, thank you to everyone. Stick with us through the summer. I know basketball calms down a little bit, but there's still going to be action happening in the WNBA, and there's still going to be all kinds of overall basketball content that we are always pushing out here on Hoopsology. So stay tuned, get that basketball itch even as the season winds down and we get into the dog days of summer, so to speak. So Justin, I'll throw to you first. I think we should go back and maybe just give quick analysis of what happened to the Knicks. I guess we can stay on the Knicks for the first part here, as they are not joining us in the NBA Finals, obviously. So they make the Eastern Conference Finals after their upgrade and retool for this season. How are you feeling about the Knicks? We've had a couple days to take a breather on this now.
Yeah, I think with the Knicks is very interesting. Heard all the discussion around them. I think they have to feel pretty good. I think they have a lot of weaknesses. I think it was very clear that the Indiana Pacers were the better team, as we said last week. But the Knicks, they have a lot of heart and a lot of perseverance. Now, the question is now, the Knicks, there used to be, I would say, in a tier of just wanting to make the playoffs, wanting to make it out of the first round. I think those days are over. I think now, with the signing of Karl-Anthony Towns and the ascension of Jalen Brunson, we're looking at finals appearances, we're looking at championships. So which means pretty hard choices. So I think there's 2 choices at hand. One is the future of Tom Thibodeau. He has been criticized for not playing his bench. He finally did against the Indiana Pacers. It was too late. And I think number 2 is the future of Giannis Antetokounmpo. And we've heard rumors of, could he be available? Could he not? We've seen crazy things in this league, so anything is possible. I know you and Allan are the experts more in trades and contracts and all that, so you would know better than me. But after Luka being traded, I think all bets are off in terms of who's available and who's not. So to me, those are the questions that come to mind. I think I'll be fascinated when we get a Ben Lyons or a Dexter Henry or another Knicks expert, just to get the vibe of what's going on in New York. I will say this: I know it's going to maybe annoy a lot of our Knicks listeners, but I do agree with Reggie Miller what he said on a podcast. I think they are a bunch. They are have a bit of front runners in them. I just feel like their arrogance of the franchise is not earned. And I think this is a very humbling loss, and I'm kind of glad it happened, even though I was personally rooting for the New York Knicks. But nevertheless, I just feel like with the Yankees, look at all the titles, right? The Lakers, look at all the championships, like the Chicago Bulls dynasty in the 90s. I think that is, well-deserved, even though I'm not a fan of this arrogant fans. I understand where that comes from. But with the Knicks, you won a title back in the 70s. That's your last championship. I don't know. I just feel like I do like the videos, but I feel like their arrogance sometimes just is annoying, and they got served a humble pie here by the Indiana Pacers, and I think just great coaching due to Rick Carlisle, and I was just really impressed with that.
Yeah, you bring up a lot there. I'm not even sure where to begin, but those are all well stated. I think the Knicks are in this window where they've got maybe one more year, maybe 2 more years with this roster as currently constructed, assuming there aren't big changes over the offseason. I think any team right now would make an effort to try and add Giannis Antetokounmpo to the roster. That includes the Oklahoma City Thunder, interestingly enough. That could happen. So, anything could happen with Giannis this offseason. I'm personally rooting for him to stay with the Bucks, but you never know. So there are many windows, and there are contracts that can be traded to make this work, to bring Giannis to New York. I'm just not sure how legitimately interested Giannis is in doing that. However, I think if I'm the Knicks, I try and rely on that continuity. You just got to the Eastern Conference Finals, and I think there are fair questions you bring about, is Coach Thibodeau the one to lead the way to get them over that hurdle and into Titletown? But I think looking at where they get right now, and also looking at the opportunity they have next year in the East, with things being arguably even more wide open, given the state of the Celtics and presumably the Bucks, I think you just keep on trucking. If you can almost virtually punch a ticket to the Eastern Conference Finals again, I think you take that. And maybe that sounds like a cop-out to some people. Maybe there's disappointment from Knicks fans in hearing that. But I think if you keep it as is, you have a better shot than if you mix it up once again. Because keep in mind, they kept some time together building up continuity and shook it up this season. If you build up some more continuity for another season, this team, in my opinion, becomes all the more dangerous if they're healthy at this point in time next season. Those things are always big ifs, but that's where I would go with this if I were the Knicks.
Yeah, I feel you, and I think to your point, it might be an improvement on the bench. They got outplayed by Indiana, so I think a lot of improvements to their roster may not be flashy, but may be super relevant this time next year in 2026, depending on what they do. I think that's kind of the main priority, more than getting a superstar. I think that really hurt them against the Pacers.
100% agree. Yeah. And maybe there are some players that want to be a part of bringing, ending this title drought in New York, that you could sign maybe at minimum contracts, because honestly, that's what it's going to take with the way the cap situation is in New York right now. Unless they are looking at making more significant moves. But you're right. Essentially, Josh Hart was a key bench player for them, and then it gets a little more dodgy after that. So a lot of positives here with this Knicks squad, and the other side of this is that there's a real chance the Pacers are in this seat again next year with this same roster. So they would just have to come back and compete better next year. Really, you look at it from a top-down perspective, you can see a lot of ways and reasons that the Knicks could have been favored in this series, and the Pacers were just the hotter team, and the Pacers were the better coach team, and the team with even more continuity than the Knicks had. And it really showed in how this all went down in this series.
Yeah,
so, Justin,
agreed.
Let's talk about a little bit of controversy during a time of celebration for the Pacers. You know where I'm going with this. Pascal Siakam wins the Eastern Conference Finals Player Award, Eastern Conference Finals MVP Award, excuse me. Many people thought this should have gone to Tyrese Halliburton. Look, there's no doubt. You and I both see these types of things pretty objectively. I mean, Siakam had 3 very strong games. It's undoubtable that Halliburton had the ooh-ah moments and some very solid games as well. So from your perspective, where would you give this award? I mean, was this the right decision? Was Halliburton wronged? Obviously, they're teammates, and you would assume this is not going to cause issues for them leading into the finals.
I think it was fairly close. I was listening to Bill Simmons, and I don't really buy his assessment that the best player the star player in a team should win it. I think it's who's deserving. Like, I don't know. His logic was weird because he was talking about how when we have talked about this a million times with our buddy Josh, when Andre Iguodala won Finals MVP over Steph Curry, when it was obvious to me that Steph Curry or even LeBron was the MVP of that series. And I just think it was relatively close. I think, honestly, Halliburton had some games that he disappeared. So did Siakam. I'm like, tomato. To me, I would have given it to Siakam, personally. But if Halliburton got it, it wouldn't be an outrage. I think it was fairly close. I think it was pretty arrogant for Halliburton to think he was going to win MVP. I think that's a humbling moment, to be honest. Like, I don't know. You have Siakam is a champion, and it's interesting that people say Halliburton's the leader, which I would agree, but I would say Siakam's just as a leader on this team. If you've been following Indiana Pacers social media, so I don't know. I don't think this is some big controversy. I think Siakam deserves it. He played spectacular in the games that the Pacers really needed. The stats are very similar. Siakam, 24.8 points a game, 52.4% shooting, 50% from 3, compared to Halliburton, 21.6 rebounds. He had 10 assists and just under 2 turnovers a game. So, tomato. I mean, it's close. I mean, you can make cases for both guys. I'm not really complaining either direction.
Yeah, I would give the edge to Halliburton just given his role on the team, but I'm with you. I'm not really outraged. I think a lot of this is emotions in remembering that shot that Halliburton hit that was incredible, in game 1 to send that game into overtime and then get the victory in that game 1. I mean, there's no doubt that the more memorable moments of the series go to Halliburton, and I think that's what is driving the controversy here. But it's a little bit of a pick'em. You could also argue that Siakam had more important roles to play on the defensive side of the ball in this series, and there's a case to be made there too. And I think this has been a story of Siakam's career, really, is that he has kind of been a more subtle superstar, if I can put it that way. He's a little bit more behind the scenes, but doing superstar things because he is somewhat of an understated guy for a guy with his level of talent.
Yeah, and biased with Siakam, he did play for New Mexico State, not the Lobos, but nevertheless, shout out to NMSU. So
I was going to say you should be biased against, if anything. I'm just
gotta be able to support the success. Hey, he's not playing the Lobos or in the TBT or something. As long as it's not directly against UNM, I'm for Siakam's success. So
absolutely. As am I, and it's great. I think there's also redemption here in having success with Indiana, given the way things kind of ended in Toronto. He was one of the last pieces from that championship team that was traded. So it kind of feels like, at least for right now, Toronto made a little bit of a mistake in siding so heavily with Scotty Barnes, or assuming there was a need to get rid of Siakam. Now, granted, contracts play out, teams have to manage their money, those types of things, but you do wonder how the Raptors feel in seeing all of this break the way that it has.
No, it's true. And not to mention, too, it's gone around. A former guest of the show, Justin Tinsley, did a fantastic job just breaking down how the Paul George trade has really affected everything. So there's different tentacles with this series coming up with the Pacers and OKC, even though it may not be the sexiest. But for Siakam in particular, yeah, I think it's a moment to really have him stand out. And, I mean, honestly, he's in line to win the Finals MVP if they pull off the upset. I mean, that is a realistic possibility if they can pull it off. But as we get to later, I don't foresee that happening.
Yeah, and let's get into it now. You mentioned that, and shout out to Justin Tinsley for that. What are we calling this? The playoff P finals? Because
right.
You're right. I mean, Paul George, oddly enough, not in the way he would want, but he does have his fingerprints all over both of these franchises, and a lot of the setup that led to this finals appearance here. Obviously, with SGA being traded to OKC, and obviously in pieces before that in Paul George being traded from Indiana to OKC prior to that trade. So, Justin, a lot of ways we can go here. I don't know where you would like to start, if you just want to give an outright prediction or start with some analysis here, but just kind of give me your thoughts on this finals.
Yeah, a couple of tidbits. Shout out to our contact with the NBA. They sent this along just for some fans to keep in mind these storylines, and when we get Allan's analysis, I'll present some more tidbits as well with this NBA finals. So first, franchise first, the Pacers are seeking their first NBA championship of their 49-season history. On the 25th anniversary of their only NBA Finals appearance, that was in 2000. So I believe that was against the Lakers. Is that correct? Is that
correct?
Part of the first three-peat, right? Like the first championship of the three-peat. Okay. And so it says here that they're looking to become the league's fourth new champ in the last 10 seasons, returning to the finals for the first time in 13 years for the Oklahoma City Thunder. They're eyeing their first championship. And then another thing is with the Thunder, you have SGA 26, Jalen Williams 24, Chet Holmgren 23. They're the second youngest NBA Finals team on record. So to me, it's youth. I think this is an ushering of a new era if OKC wins. And also, not only that, if they do win the NBA Finals, it would finish the season with the most victories, regular season and playoffs combined, by a champion since Michael Jordan and the 1996-97 Bulls. So
Correct.
To me, this is a storyline that's not being discussed. Bill Simmons mentioned it, I think, like a couple of podcasts ago, but I don't think it's like an overwhelming narrative that this could be one of the greatest teams in the history of the NBA. Yet that's not being discussed at all for the Thunder. And I think that's a positive thing, because there's not that looming pressure of history. No one's talking about it, so it's just kind of the normal expectations of a team that's never been in the finals before. To me, looking at when they beat the Nuggets and then how they handled the Timberwolves, I think the Thunder are the overwhelming favorite. I am not changing my prediction in terms of the Pacers might get a game, just due to their tenacity and defense and the coaching of Rick Carlisle. But overall, I just think the Thunder are too deep. I think SGA is at a peak where this is a coming out party for this team. I think this could be, everybody talked about Anthony Edwards, which I thought was overblown. And I think this is the true coming out of a potential, everybody's wondering about a possible new superstar. SGA seems to be fitting the bill. I mean, he won MVP. If he has a great performance in this series, if he wins Finals MVP, this is kind of the setting point to create OKC as a possible, new Western Conference power for the next 10 years. I mean, the team's super young. I mean, all these dudes. I mean, he'll be 36 in 10 years. I mean, we've seen guys play up into their 40s. Jalen Williams will be 34, and Chet Holmgren will be 33. I mean, these guys stick together for 10 years. I mean, and right now in this era of the NBA, it is very much a lot of parity right now. And if this team's able to stay together with their draft picks and everything, I can see them not being dethroned for a long time. So that's where I'm looking at is, in my heart of hearts, do I want 7 games? Absolutely. But I don't think it's going to go that way, and I think OKC is going to be fairly dominant.
You bring up a good point there in that in a league of parity right now, this is one of the few teams that you could see with dynasty potential with how they are built. So they would be somewhat of an anomaly. We're used to dynasties in league history. It's been something that I think is great for the league, whether people want to admit that or not. I think that familiarity is helpful in building of those legacies of multiple titles. But with the cap and the new laws, the new regulations with that, it is going to be interesting to see how many pieces they can keep and how many need to move on, given that you can really kind of have like 2 max contracts and then you have to kind of figure it out differently with the rest of your team. But we'll see how that plays out. Regardless, even with that being said, with all the flexibility this team has, there is dynasty potential here. Real quickly, Justin, I told you I did my homework on this. I tried to anyway in this prediction. It's not going to vary much for those of you who listen to the show on a regular basis from what we discussed in the last In the Labs, but I'm going to give you some more reasons why. Oklahoma City won the regular season series 2-0. They won by an average of about 13.5 points per game. Now, granted, small sample size, 1 game in Indiana, 1 game in OKC, and I don't like to put a ton of stock into regular season matchups, but for what it's worth, OKC won both of those games pretty handily. I found it, just side note, interesting that they're labeling this as OKC's first title, and yet in some ways the franchise, because it came from Seattle, and Seattle has a title, in some ways, it's not their first title, but it certainly is in OKC, no doubt. The Indiana Pacers, they have had title success. It was just in the ABA in the 70s. So no NBA title success, but they did win a few titles in the 70s in the ABA. So look, in breaking this down, Justin, I've got the backcourt. I feel like OKC has pieces that can really challenge Tyrese Halliburton. I think when you look at the grand scheme of things in this series, you've got a Pacers team that does a pretty good job most games in controlling the ball and not causing turnovers, and a team in OKC that loves to create turnovers, and that creates a lot of subsequent offense for them, easy buckets. They've been making teams look silly even in the playoffs with some of the turnovers they're able to generate. We'll see how that tug of war goes, and if Indiana is able to control the ball against, one of the best defenses we've seen in quite some time. But I think in the backcourt, I give the advantage to OKC. They have more that they can throw at Halliburton compared to, I don't think Indiana really has someone who can stop SGA. I think they can maybe give him some effort on defense, but I think he's going to be able to pick his spots, and I think he should be finals MVP to kind of spoil that. In the front court, I think this matchup is closer between these two teams, but I still think OKC, maybe they have a little bit less star power here, but I think they are more versatile in the front court, so I do give a slight edge to OKC there. In terms of depth, I think when you look at depth from a sense of two-way play, defense and offense, I would give OKC the advantage here too. Indiana has a deep bench as well that served both of these teams well in their playoff runs, but I think OKC just has a little bit more. In coaching, I would give the edge to Rick Carlisle just because of his experience. Interestingly enough, Justin, this is his 6th appearance in the NBA Finals.
Wow.
He's had 3 as a player, 1 as an assistant coach, and 2 as a head coach. So pretty cool. Last time he was in the finals, of course, that's when the Dallas Mavericks upset the Miami Heat in that 2010-2011 NBA Finals. So he's also undefeated in the finals as a head coach anyway. So I think both of these teams are coming into this red hot, but I think OKC is hotter and has played tougher competition along the way. I think you could argue that Denver and maybe even Minnesota is better than the competition that Indiana has faced along the way, especially when you consider the Knicks' previous record against top opponents, like top 4 seeded opponents. It makes them look like a weaker opponent. I think Indiana has had the better luck in their playoff runs, not to their fault, just some of the teams that they've gone up against. The Bucks, the Cavs have had injury issues. Thankfully, the Knicks didn't have too much of that, but we're looking at a team that won, one full strength credible series versus a team that has run the still very stacked and difficult Western Conference, save for maybe their series against the Memphis Grizzlies, which we covered. So I am with you, Justin. I see this as a gentleman's sweep. I would not be surprised if it's a full sweep, but I'm going to go OKC in 5 just to give the Pacers a little bit of respect because it has been a great year for them.
Yeah, right there with you. And I will say with Halliburton, if he's struggling, he has to force the issue. He just can't have 15 shots or lower. He just has to be assertive, even if it's uncomfortable, because that's the only shot they have. If they're going to win, is he has to be assertive, even when he's struggling. It's okay if you miss a ton of shots, but you're the superstar. You're going to post videos on social media of the Knicks, celebrating, and then you showing it to them faces that you beat them in the Eastern Conference Finals. You gotta force the issue, and even if the shot's not falling, you gotta be assertive. So I'm looking for that for Halliburton.
Yeah, and that's what will determine if he is considered in the very, very top tier of superstars. That's kind of the question mark right now. A lot of podcasts have been debating, is he a top 10 player in the league right now? I would say no at the moment, but he's had some huge moments, no doubt, this playoffs. It certainly has built his resume, as we've discussed. I think he's going to have a hell of a time stepping up and creating those things when it counts against this OKC defense. So if he can do that, big tip of the cap to him, and it could elevate his status in the league.
Yeah. No, agreed.
So, Justin, we have one more topic here. Did you want to get into it real quick?
Yeah, I just want to touch base with you. Inside the NBA, this is a show that we have talked about just over the years during our friendship. I mean, we've known each other since middle school, so this show's been around before then. So it is still going to live on ESPN, but it's going to be different. It's unknown. I heard Charles Barkley on Dan Patrick conflicting reports in terms of they shot a pilot, and from Charles shot a pilot for the new Inside the NBA. That's going to be at ESPN. Barkley said this. Pilot for the new TNT NBA show was the stupidest expletive I've ever seen. So, I mean, I don't know.
Tell us how you really feel, Chuck.
Right. Personally, I think it's fairly easy. I mean, you're hiring the same crew. You got the same guys. Just produce the same show. So I don't see why this is an issue in terms of what's going to happen. I think Barkley did say that he has, 7 years on his contract, but he's only going to do 2. So I think that the key to that show is Ernie Johnson. I think if he goes, I think that show doesn't really have any momentum. I just think everything evolves around Ernie Johnson, and he's the special sauce. So if Ernie decides to retire or leave or doesn't want to do it anymore, I don't think the show can go on without him, in my opinion.
Yeah, no disagreement from me. They're telling us all the things we want to hear in terms of this continuity. But, man, I got to say, I don't know. This is tied to the company that brought us the sequel trilogy from Star Wars. I know they're different branches of that company. You see what's going on with Marvel lately. You see a lot of things that that company has fumbled the bag with, and I am highly, highly skeptical and worried about Inside the NBA. I think they're trying to drag it along for Name recognition, obviously, the cast of that show everyone loves. I love their analysis, no doubt. But I'm very worried, and I don't know that I can add much more than that. I'm very eager to see what it looks like.
Well, it's fair. I mean, also to just keep it within ESPN, this is the same company that they fired Bill Simmons. This is the same company that's had all these different pregame shows. You had all the different controversies that have happened over the years. The jump, all that different stuff that worked with Bill Simmons that he incorporated that I thought was cool and different from the inside the NBA. You got rid of it. And you see now with what they try to implement with this new NBA Today show, and they try to do all these different things. It's just corny. So from Front Office Sports, I do want to read this before we bounce. It says that this is from Michael McCarthy at Front Office Sports. He says, quote, "The Inside the NBA will lead ESPN's NBA pregame and halftime programming, and there will be an extensive postgame show." So, and it says that there's no plans to change the show's DNA. But you hear Charles Barkley, I'm not going to work more than I have to. So ESPN carries more games. They do Wednesday, they do Friday, and they do Saturday. So, I mean, I don't really know what is going to happen with this. I foresee a cluster. And I think, to me, hearing them with Shaq and with Kenny and with Charles, just them going over what's going to happen, they seem not excited about this. Just with their rhetoric, I have a feeling this might be a train wreck. It'll make for great television, but I just think in terms of the DNA of the show, yeah, it's gonna be different.
Yeah, I think anything's on the table. I mean,
yeah.
with those guys, what's the incentive? I mean, they've all, including Ernie. I know Ernie has integrity as an analyst and everything. I have no doubt he's going to do the best he can. But with the rest of the guys on there, I mean, they will be entertaining no matter what. But if things aren't fun when they get there, I mean, who's to say they won't collect this last check and then ride off into the sunset if they're not having a good time? And I don't know if I can fault them if they are being restricted on this side of things now, if it's not looking how it's been promised and sort of like spelled out to be. Not saying that's something that most people can afford to do, but those guys are all Hall of Famers, legends in basketball circles, and it could be the way it goes if they're not having fun on TV. I just don't see them sticking around and doing it much longer.
The biggest saving grace is Pat McAfee. I say that because they let Pat McAfee do whatever he wants. They let his guests do whatever they want. Pat McAfee is arguably the biggest personality on ESPN besides Stephen A. Smith, and he basically has little to no restrictions. So to me, this is very similar to Pat McAfee, and so far they let the guy do whatever. So for me, with Inside the NBA, if we do see kind of ESPN executives get involved in this, it could get very ugly because they've let Pat McAfee do whatever. I've seen plenty of guests say whatever and do whatever controversial things counter to what ESPN's trying to present to their audience. So to me, with Inside the NBA, if they're going to crack down on their production, there's going to be some huge problems.
Absolutely. Well said. And I know we got to wrap up this segment. So Justin, I will say goodbye to you, but dear listener and viewer, you will say hello to Justin and Allan. I will see you again very soon on In the Lab. I won't even say peace out because we're going to continue with this finals preview. Thank you, Justin, and I look forward to hearing yours and Allan's analysis in this next segment.
Appreciate it. So we got Matt's thoughts on the NBA Finals, the Eastern Conference Finals, Inside the NBA. Now it's Allan's turn. Now, since we last chat with Matt, some breaking news has transpired. The New York Knicks made a huge move, firing Tom Thibodeau. I want to read you this, Allan, and I'll get your thoughts, and I'll let you go. I'm sure you have tons of thoughts on this. This comes from CBS Sports. Sam Quinn, he reports that the New York Knicks have fired Tom Thibodeau. They announced Tuesday at the recording of this podcast. The decision comes 3 days after the Knicks were eliminated from the Eastern Conference Finals. The Knicks entered the season hoping to win their first championship since 1973 after spending 6 first-round picks, a first-round swap, Julius Randle, and Dante DiVincenzo to acquire Mikal Bridges and Karl Anthony Towns in the offseason. Despite their best postseason run since 2000, they ultimately failed in the NBA Finals against the Pacers. Thibodeau won 56.5% of his regular season games, and he had a record of 226 and 174 over 5 seasons. This is from the Knicks organization, says, quote, "Our organization is singularly focused on winning a championship for our fans. This pursuit led us to make the difficult decision to inform Tom Thibodeau that we have decided to move in another direction." And that was from Leon Rose. "We can't thank Tom enough for his pouring his heart and soul into each and every day of being with the New York Knicks head coach. He has led us with class and professionalism over the past 5 seasons, but also to tremendous success on the court with 4 playoff berths and 4 playoff series victories. Ultimately, we made the decision we feel is best for our organization moving forward. Tom will always be a part of the Knicks family, and we truly wish him nothing but the best in the future." So, Allan, I'll let you take it away. What are your thoughts on this situation?
Justin, we were texting about this earlier today, and I my thoughts were like, what happened to like longevity and having like stability in the coaching? Because we've seen big teams make really interesting coaching decisions, and this is another one that I guess it makes sense if you think Mike Malone is the answer to the Knicks' woes in the postseason. So good luck to you, Knicks. But I mean, that's the only reason I can think they made this is because they think they're getting Mike Malone. Otherwise, I don't know who else is out there that could take this team on. But we were texting earlier today. I'll go back to that. I mean, could you imagine if the Spurs fired Pop in 2002 or Spoelstra got fired in 2017? Or Daigneault got fired after last year? I mean, what happened to like saying like, you know what? The coach is a part of the identity of the team and of the franchise, and that's how we're going to roll. It just seems like those days are gone. And I think the NBA is a little poorer for it. But I do think that there are teams that are smart enough to hang on to their coaches as long as they can, which is why I don't think Daigneault's going anywhere. Win, lose the NBA Finals, they will stay with him. And I don't think, so I don't know. It's just weird. It's a weird thing.
Correct me if I'm wrong. What was the circumstances behind Steve Kerr getting the job? Did Mark Jackson, when he got fired, did the Warriors make the playoffs that year? I remember that being a controversial decision. Am I correct on that? Is this kind of similar to this, or am I wrong on that?
Yeah, they made the playoffs. They played really well against San Antonio, who eventually beat them. But it was really, I remember that series. It was Steph and Clay's coming out party. That series. That was when people were like, "Oh, hey, the Warriors actually might be good if this Steph Curry guy can stay healthy."
Gotcha.
So, so yeah. I mean, what? I mean, Justin, are you proposing that the Knicks got rid of Tibbs and they're going to hire Noah Eagle as their coach?
As much love that we have for Noah Eagle. I think his.
And we love Noah.
Yeah, I think he's set to do big things on NBC. But I think this is a panic move by the Knicks. I've heard all these conspiracy theories in terms of Leon Rose and Karl Anthony Towns and just, Tom's decision making during just the Pacers series and just what's his strategy in not playing the bench. I'm just wondering. I agree with you, Allan. Like, who is a better alternative at this point? I mean, I have my own beef with Thibodeau just with the Bulls. I mean, he had to have his flaws certainly, but I think just to fire him like this, and I think it's very clear that this was a personnel issue in terms of why the Knicks didn't make the finals compared to he got outcoached. I certainly think there are some coaching things that Rick Carlisle bested Thibodeau on, but I don't think it justifies firing him. So I'm just wondering at this point, who is out there? What do you think is it besides Malone? I mean, is there any other candidate that you have in mind for this job?
I think for this job, I don't think it's a position that some young assistant coach is going to go for, right? So I don't think you're going to see Ben Johnson Ben Sullivan jump over into the Knicks. I don't think you're going to see Brett Brown pop over. Well, he's not a young assistant, but you know what I mean. I think, their choices are going to be like between Malone, Bud, Vogel. I think it's the people who've won in the past few years. And I don't know that any of those are necessarily better than Tibbs.
Before we move on to this, the Pacers and recapping that series real quick, you mentioned that the NBA is worse for wear because of this happening. You mentioned Mike Malone. Is there a disturbing trend of this happening, in your opinion, in terms of coaches having success in the playoffs, but yet getting fired and kind of hoping that the grass is greener on the other side? And do you think there could be long consequences in terms of this kind of harming the league? I mean, can you kind of crystallize this in terms of how this might affect the viewing fan that watches games every night? Could this damage the product in any way?
Yeah, the average casual fan, I think, is going to watch the games and enjoy the games for what they are. I think the more involved fans, or the fans who maybe have more, like your local fans, your local fan base, who are more tied in with team identity, I think they might suffer a little bit. I think the teams overall suffer because your coach, more than anyone probably in the team, drives the identity of the team. Your superstar players are the people who are front and center, but how that team plays and the product on the court is defined by the coach. Now, bad coaches don't do a good job of defining that, and so they go by the wayside. But Tibbs teams are very much defined by his coaching personality, as were Pop's. As say Udoka, you see an Udoka team, you see a Kerr team, you know what those are, right? You see a Pat Riley team, you know what that is, you know what you're getting. You see a Phil Jackson, I could go on and on. I think this kind of short leash for coaching, it almost feels very much like, it feels a little venture capital-y and tech bro to me. And I think that's the part that I'm concerned about with the league, because if you let the venture cap guys and the tech bros take over, you will get this. You will get moving on from players. You will get lack of continuity. You will get everybody chasing the immediate profit with no thought for foundational strategies and work.
I will say, just to counter that, in terms of the old ways of ownership, more families, I would have to say there's a lot of kind of dead teams in the NBA. I mean, look at the Clippers with Donald Sterling. I mean, he was only cared about like a profit and just, parading his players out there. He didn't care about putting out a great team until they drafted Blake Griffin. So I'm sure there's other teams like that. And I feel like now with the NBA, I feel like there's more of a pressure to put out a decent product out on the court. But like you're saying, I think that's true. Like we're kind of seeing with the Suns. You bring up ownership. Do you think this call to fire Thibodeau was James Dolan, or do you think it was Leon Rose? Who do you think ultimately made the decision?
I mean, it's always going to go back to Leon Rose, but I am absolutely. I know Jim Dolan definitely had a hand in it as well, and I think, yeah, I have no doubt about that.
So let's shift and let's talk about the Indiana Pacers, and this will hop into our discussion about the NBA Finals. The Pacers are, I would say, the underdog in this series against OKC, and I think they're riding high, and they're coming off at really huge performances by Pascal Siakam and Tyrese Halliburton. Controversy there in regards to Siakam winning the Eastern Conference Finals MVP. Did you have a problem with it? I don't know if you saw the video. Halliburton, he automatically assumed he was going to win, and he was in for a surprise. So, what did you think of Pascal Siakam winning the MVP?
I thought it was interesting. I think the people it was 5-4.
Yeah.
The 5 people who voted for him obviously looked at the overall consistency that Pascal brought to the series and the elevation of his game throughout the entire series, which kudos to Pascal. I mean, that was a crazy good trade. But Tyrese is the engine that makes that team go. And even when he's not putting up 20 points, he is still handing out a lot of assists and making sure that people are in the right place. So, it was as close as you can get with this kind of vote. I would have leaned towards Tyrese myself, but I can't fault somebody for looking at the overall consistency of Pascal, because Tyrese was up and down in the series. Yeah, he was bad in the losses and great in the wins.
Yeah.
And some of those wins, he was horrible in the first half.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's how and Matt agrees with you. But I told him, I think with Halliburton, he posted that video on social media about, the crazy Knicks fans and the Pacers ultimately getting the best of them. And I think when you do that, when you do the choke sign, you got to show up in the NBA Finals, like you were saying, when you have bad performances. That's going to stick with you. If you want to be the superstar and the main guy, similarly to Anthony Edwards, you're facing SGA, and he's been playing great throughout the entire playoffs. But you can't have games where you just disappear and not taking shots. It's one thing to miss shots. Jordan didn't shoot spectacularly, in certain playoff performances, but he always got to the line. He was always made his presence known, even though he wasn't having a great shooting night. So I think for Halliburton, I think it's imperative that he keeps the pressure on. And I think as we segue into the NBA Finals, we kind of made our predictions on the last In the Lab. Have you changed your mind any in terms of giving a Pacers a shot in this series? Or do you think this is going to be an OKC butt kicking from the word go?
I think I still go OKC in 5. Yeah. If you remember, I said OKC in 5 or Knicks in 7, just because I think the Knicks were better suited to play against Indiana. Against Oklahoma City. I think Tyrese has not played well against Oklahoma City ever. I think that the physicality of the perimeter defenders on that team is too strong for him. So yeah, I think it's OKC in 5, and I also think Shea struggled early on in the playoffs, but he's been so smooth, just calm. Nothing's getting to him. He's just doing his game. I think this is his coronation, and this OKC team frightens me because I don't think they're going anywhere.
So some additional facts about this series, and I want to ask you a question about OKC being underrated. So this series winner will give the NBA 7 different champions in a 7-year span for the first time ever. Thunder versus Pacers is also the 6th first-time NBA Finals matchup in those 7 seasons. The Pacers, seed number 4, belies their excellence in overcoming a 10 and 15 start into the regular season, powered by Tyrese Halliburton in the 2025 NBA All-Star and Eastern Conference Finals MVP Pascal Siakam. Indiana has had the second best record across the regular season and playoffs since January 1st, only behind Oklahoma City. But as mentioned with Matt, Oklahoma City is set to make history here in terms of possibly being the winningest team since the Bulls. And yet no one's talking about them. So do you think in this series, 2 small market teams, but yeah, OKC's going for history? We talked about the media coverage. Is this a failure on the media coverage to really give OKC that respect? Because usually records in sports, other sports fans are usually attracted to. They talk about records being broken. Who's going to break this record, even if the team's boring? It's pretty standard. But yeah, we have not heard the storyline. Is this a failure of the media? Is this an indictment of the media coverage of ESPN, TNT, etc.? But by not giving OKC the respect that they deserve, despite them being a small market team.
Oh yeah, I think so. I I think so, but I, those lights always shine bright on the East Coast and the West Coast. Um, Oklahoma City's right smack dab in the middle. It's a small market, but uh, it's a great team. It's a fun to watch team. Um, and I think, from looking from like a media perspective, they should be pumping these guys up. Um, and you're starting to see like a lot of commercials. Like I'm inundated now with commercials with the big three from OKC.
That's right.
Um, it's starting to catch on a little bit, but I mean, you're looking for your future superstars, your future people. This is kind of what you need to latch on to. If you're the NBA, if you're the media, eh, this is more an indictment of the decline of local media than it is anything else. With the consolidation of local media into large conglomerates, where they're kind of told what to talk about and what to place emphasis on, and uh, you know, uh, and the idea being that people just want to hear about things in New York or L.A. or San Francisco or wherever, right? But so yeah, I think it's a failure of the media, but I don't blame the media. I blame the consolidation that we've seen over the past 30 years.
Gotcha. Real quick before we shift into another media topic with Inside the NBA, you have an MVP prediction or anything that fans are not paying attention to in this series, or your casual fan, honestly, they're probably not going to be interested in this series, but why they should tune in considering your prediction of a dominant OKC victory.
Yeah, I think casual fans should click in for several reasons. One, if you like defense, this series is going to be insane. Um, Two, if you are tired of dunks and threes all the time, this series is going to be made for you. Oklahoma City's mid-range game is crazy. I mean, that's Shea's preferred shot, and Jalen Williams for that matter. So I think for offensive and defensive purposes, for a casual fan, for someone who's a lapsed fan, this is a great throwback series. Who cares where they're from? Unless you live in Indiana or Oklahoma, you those are the people who really care the most about where it's from. The rest of us should just enjoy the basketball. Um, I just don't get that. Honestly, I don't get the fans who are just like, I only watch the Lakers and only when the Lakers win. I'm like, what are you, like 12? It's just a stupidity I can't grapple with. Um, uh, Apologies to the viewers out there who are like that, but you're just dumb. Um, so yeah, I don't know, Justin. I think things to look for MVP. I think Shea will be the MVP. Um, uh, he's I just think he's gotten better and better as the playoffs has gone, and he's gotten more comfortable. Um, uh, I think I'm going to guess that Chet is going to come close to breaking some sort of blocks record in one of the games.
Oh wow. Oh
Um,
wow.
uh, so because Indiana likes to attack the basket, um, and Miles Turner's going to build some really cool Lego set, and it's going to be really cool.
Well, I feel you in terms of just media coverage and just fans. I mean, it's kind of like, you're in high school, stereotypically, the person that's most qualified, it's not what's it called, student council president. It's always like the most popular kid. I mean, it's always people they want to go for the shiny object and not something of substance. I think sports is very much like that. I do feel like these two teams, I think compared to other teams in the NBA Finals past, they have a lot of interesting storylines, a lot of great young players. That's going to be really fueling the league in the future. So definitely something to check out for all fans. Go ahead, Allan. You have another point.
I was going to say there's one other thing about this series. It's a pet peeve of mine. So for both of these teams, in my mind, this is their first. This would be the first time either of them won a championship. You don't get to count the Seattle SuperSonics championship for Oklahoma City. That was a different team, a different time, a different city. It doesn't count. The championships are for the people of the city. So that's what matters with that. So I just want to put that out there. I am tired of seeing that. And also, sorry, Lakers fans, that means your Minneapolis Lakers titles don't count, and Boston does have the most titles. Sorry about that.
No, I agree. Yeah, it's a totally different team. I feel like I never understood the lineage. That doesn't really make any sense. I think once a team moves, that's it. It's over. Like, the OKC has their own new record. And then, if Seattle gets a team, then it should resume when Seattle gets their team back. So I agree with you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's shift
don't even ask me about the Houston Texans versus the Houston Oilers, because I will.
That's super confusing.
I will. Oh, I will get so mad. It's petty.
Well, what about the Baltimore Ravens and the Colts too? I mean, I don't know. The NFL, it's crazy with their lineage. I don't know. Yeah. Let's shift the last topic. Inside the NBA, they had their last show on TNT, now on ESPN. I talked to Matt. He stated, we discussed how all the hosts, they don't seem too excited to go on ESPN. I heard on Bill Simmons' podcast about how much trash Charles has talked about ESPN, but now he's going to be working for them. There's been just multiple issues with this. Kind of, what do you think about this show overall? Do you think a lot is being made of the show? As much as I love this show did come on around 2 o'clock in the morning on the East Coast most of the time. And up until recently, I'm talking about with the social media era, I mean, unless you're a basketball junkie and knew about this, I mean, the show wasn't too relevant in the basketball sphere. I mean, in the casual sports sphere, because it came on so late. And so really, I think now, because of social media, it's really taken off. So do you think, in terms of people making a big deal of this show going to ESPN, is this kind of, should fans be making a big stink about this? Or do you think this is like a serious concern that ESPN could ruin the show once we get started again in October?
I think the show in its current format is gone. I'm going to treat this just like I treat Seattle moving to Oklahoma City. That show's dead and gone. This is a new show. We'll see what it's like. We'll see if ESPN can figure out how to fix their studio issues. Quite frankly, I'm much more excited by the NBC and Amazon offerings for studio shows and host. So I think they seem like they get it. NBC really, I'm really excited to see the NBC show. For Inside the NBA, I think it's gone now. I think coming on once every few weeks on ESPN as some sort of special show, it feels like something that's just going to just die a slow death. It's like a spin-off of MASH, right? It's after MASH.
No, I think that's true. And I want to ask you, why do you think it's been? I've felt that ever since ESPN's gotten the coverage of the NBA, it's always been a massive struggle for their studio. I mean, whether it's The Jump or even NBA Today, Bill Simmons is on there. Magic Johnson was on there for a short time. I know he was on TNT, but he was also on ESPN. It just seems like they've never gotten this coverage, right? As I mentioned to Matt, you would see some of their analysts, they would just try to do things like Inside the NBA, but it comes off corny and whack. Why do you think that there's been a constant struggle for ESPN to get their coverage correct? Because I feel like with football, that's also a pain point with Monday Night Football as well. And with their college coverage, it's fantastic. With College Game Day, I think that gets glowing reviews. They've added Pat McAfee, and I mean, even despite some controversy, that seems like that show has leveled up. But yet, with the NFL and especially with the NBA, I never heard any complaints about their baseball coverage. Maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but there seems to be with the NBA, there seems to be the massive pain point of just all of a sudden the analyst and the lead anchor switching all the time, just constant like not getting along. There's always the Stephen A. Smith factor. Why do you think this has been a huge struggle for ESPN?
There's two things I want to point out here. One is I think they take themselves way too seriously. Um, I mean, part of the joy of Inside the NBA, particularly since Barkley joined, it was a good show before then, but Barkley really upped the level of it. Was that he was goofy, but earnest in his goofiness. Um, uh, he wasn't trying to act goofy. He was just earnestly a goofy television personality who didn't take himself seriously and wasn't afraid to be wrong. Um, and he was always wrong, so it kind of helped. Um, I just Stephen A. Smith's never going to do that, and he comes from that whole I yell and yell and yell and yell and yell at you until you know that's how I win my arguments. Um, so I don't know. That's one reason why I'm excited to kind of see what Steve Nash and Dirk Nowitzki do, because neither of those guys suffer from taking themselves too seriously. Um, so I hope they'll be funny and insightful. Um, the other point I wanted to make about Inside the NBA is that sometimes you just catch lightning in a bottle, and it takes a while it happens every now and then. So ESPN hasn't been able to do that in a long time. Um, Honestly, I, I think Stuart Scott was probably the last great ESPN studio guy, and we are the poorer for no longer having him around. Um, we don't no more booyahs. So I think I don't know. It's like Deadpool comics. I talk to my kids about this all the time. Joe Kelly had a great '90s run that really established the breaking the fourth wall character of Deadpool in the comics. And then after that, it was kind of eh. And then Jerry Dugan had a run in 2012 that was excellent. And Deadpool's all cool again. And then they've gotten A-list writers to come in afterwards and do Deadpool after Jerry left. These series last maybe 10, 15, 20 issues. They just can't capture the lightning in the bottle yet. So I think it's where ESPN is right now. They're trying to capture lightning in a bottle, and they're not having any luck. So now they're going to try to borrow it from the Prometheus of Inside the NBA. And I don't think that's going to work. They're just going to have to figure it out and try to find the right mix of people. And I think it's going to sting when NBC and Amazon turn into having better studio shows right from the launch.
Well, I've said this over and over again. Andrea Carter, Shania Wool-McKay, and Al Duncan, that is your NBA studio crew. I mean, it's very obvious to me. Just seeing them do their WNBA coverage, their women's basketball coverage, they do some NBA stuff too. It's pretty apparent they have the best chemistry. They have their own unique energy, and to me, I would hire them. I mean, it's pretty obvious, but they would never do that. But I agree with you, Allan. I think it just shows not only the three I just mentioned, but also Jalen Rose, also with Bill Simmons with like I think the Grantland Basketball Hour, like all these different things. They've had the opportunity to take a different approach to the NBA, but they've always decided to go with a stale studio approach. And they have the personalities. Jay Billis, I think, is interesting. I think when Jalen Rose was there, he was interesting. When David Jacoby, he was interesting. When Bill Simmons, as crazy as he was on there, and bizarre takes or whatever, he was inner counterpoint compared to the other ones. He wasn't cookie cutter. Did not come from a TV broadcasting background, but for whatever reason, they were never able to meld that into their own style, and they've suffered ever since. And I think you're right, Allan, in terms of I think NBC's got the nostalgia aspect going for it, and what we'll see about Amazon is it's going to be very fresh, very new. I know their NFL coverage seems to get a lot of good reviews, so I think the momentum's with those other two networks, and And I think another thing too, for those who are wondering if it's going to be ruined or not, I will say to kind of push back to your original point. I mentioned this with Matt. I will say I don't think the show's going. I think the actual show will stay the same because of one guy, Pat McAfee. Pat McAfee's able to curse. He's able to do whatever. He's had I told Matt this. He had controversial guests. They don't really tell Pat McAfee too much. And I think with inside the NBA, they don't have quite the leverage that Pat McAfee does, but pretty close. And so I think we've seen it with the production staff that's going to stay with inside the NBA. You're going to use all the TNT people. I think as long as that stays the case, I think the show stays the same. Now, how much you see it is that's going to be different. I have no idea. But at least when you watch them, I don't, because the thing is, if they're going to police what they're going to say, the show's over. That's game set match. They're gonna walk out and leave. They won't care, and and it doesn't matter because they have armies of lawyers, and the public sentiment's gonna be on their side. The leverage is on the inside the NBA crew. They don't need ESPN. So I think from that aspect, the show will stay the same. But you're right in terms of, this actual iteration is going to be different. But I think in the future. Yeah, it is a concern of ESPN screwing this up because their track record has been terrible. So I kind of feel both ways about it, but it's going to be a roller coaster. As I told Matt, it's going to make for great TV, I think, one way or another.
We'll see. I mean, look, kudos to TNT. Yeah. Whoever's over there making the decisions for their shows, because their hockey coverage is top notch. Their hockey studio shows, love that stuff. Getting Chelios on there, and their French Open, they're doing the French Open. It is amazing. It is like the really best good. French Open coverage I have seen in a long time. Like putting Sam Querrey and Caroline Wozniacki on the thing with Lefko is brilliant. They're learning each other. Someone at TNT has an eye for talent and how to mix it, and whoever that is. They need to pay that person a lot of money.
Yeah, no, totally agree. I think that's going to wrap things up. Anything else you wanted to add, Allan, before we say goodbye?
No. I apologize to everybody. I've brought in Deadpool comics, the French Open, Prometheus, and Greek mythology to this conversation. I'm so sorry. But everyone have a great day.
No worries. I bring in pro wrestling sometimes, so we're bringing all kinds of stuff on here. A couple of shout outs before we say goodbye. I just want to mention that all of our podcasts are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever device or program you use to listen to for shows like ours. We are on there. Check out our YouTube channel. Like Matt said previously, appreciate all the new subscribers, appreciate all the new views. We dive into, the latest topics. We just had a discussion about the NBA Finals inside the NBA, but we also delve into basketball culture. So check out our archive interviews. Just had an interview ready to go right now with Big Dave of CHGO. We've chatted with Sue Bird. We've had our Kings of Sport Hoopsology crossover. We've talked with John Nolan of the Indiana Fever. He's a play-by-play commentator, as well as Krista Blanc, play-by-play commentator for the Aces. Another play-by-play commentator for the Connecticut Sun, Braden Bell. Just tons of content for you if you're a hoops head. We're loaded all the way through June, all the way through July with Summer League, with WNBA, and with a lot of other leagues as well. So just because the NBA is going away doesn't mean that we are, and we have tons of great interviews set for you for the rest of the year. If you have comments or questions, please email us at hoopsologypod@gmail.com or leave a comment and like this video if you're watching on YouTube as well. So for Allan Munsler, I am Justin Goodrum. Enjoy the NBA Finals, and we will see you next time. See you later.